Welcome back, everyone. For more than a century, maneuver warfare defined how great powers fought and won wars. Speed, shock, encirclement, and decisive movement were the language of victory. Armies that could move faster, strike deeper, and collapse enemy formations without grinding attrition were considered superior. Russia inherited this belief from the Soviet Union, refined it through Cold War doctrine, and displayed it proudly in military parades and exercises. Tanks, armored columns, and rapid advances were not just tools of war. They were symbols of national power. But the battlefield changed while Russia was still rehearsing the past. The end of maneuver warfare did not arrive suddenly. It arrived quietly, invisibly, and when Russia finally realized it, it was already too late. Russia's biggest mistake was not tactical. It was philosophical. The assumption that massed armor and rapid movement could still dominate a modern battlefield ignored a revolution that had already taken place. Warfare had shifted from speed on the ground to vision from the sky. Information replaced momentum. Detection replaced surprise. Precision replaced brute force. Maneuver warfare depends on the ability to move unseen and strike unexpectedly. In a world saturated with drones, satellites, sensors, and real-time intelligence, that condition no longer exists. When Russian forces advanced, they were seen instantly. Every road, every field, every bridge was watched. Drones hovered patiently, relaying coordinates. Satellites tracked convoys from space. Thermal cameras pierced camouflage and darkness. The battlefield was no longer a fog. It was a glass box. Movement, once the key to survival, became the greatest risk. Maneuver warfare collapsed the moment movement became synonymous with exposure. Russian doctrine assumed armored breakthroughs would paralyze resistance. Instead, armored columns stalled, became targets, and were dismantled piece by piece. Long convoys stretched across open terrain, vulnerable from above and from the flanks. Tanks that tried to push forward were struck by top-attack missiles. Tanks that stopped were hit by artillery. Tanks that hid were discovered by drones. There was no safe posture left. This revealed a brutal truth. Maneuver warfare requires not just speed, but protection, coordination, and logistics. Russia lacked all three in a modern sense. Air superiority was incomplete. Electronic warfare was inconsistent. Infantry support was often inadequate. Logistics assumed secure rear areas that no longer existed. Supply trucks became as hunted as frontline vehicles. Fuel shortages immobilized armor. Ammunition scarcity slowed operations. Repair and recovery units could not operate safely. The entire system designed to support maneuver warfare collapsed under constant surveillance and precision attack. The tank, once the spearhead of maneuver warfare, became its most visible failure. Tanks were never meant to operate alone, but Russia's formations often did. Without effective infantry screening, drones and missile teams closed in. Without air cover, top-down threats multiplied. Without rapid repair, damaged tanks were abandoned. Each destroyed tank was not just a loss of equipment, but a psychological blow, broadcast instantly across the world. Maneuver warfare also depends on command flexibility. Junior commanders must exploit opportunities as they arise. Units must adapt in real time. Russia's command structure struggled with this reality. Orders were centralized. Initiative was discouraged. Reporting bad news was risky. As a result, units waited for instructions while the battlefield changed around them. By the time decisions were approved, the opportunity had vanished, or worse, the unit had already been targeted. In contrast, modern warfare rewards decentralization. Small teams operating drones, artillery, and missiles can achieve effects once reserved for entire brigades. Learning cycles are rapid. Tactics evolve weekly. Russia attempted to adapt, but adaptation within a rigid system is slow and uneven. Innovation existed, but it was not institutionalized. Lessons learned at the front were not always transmitted effectively. Meanwhile, opponents adjusted faster, cheaper, and more flexibly. The end of maneuver warfare forced Russia into a war it did not want to fight: attrition. Attrition warfare is slow, costly, and unforgiving. It favors economies that can sustain production, societies that can endure losses, and systems that can innovate under pressure. Russia entered this phase with significant disadvantages. Sanctions restricted access to advanced components. Production struggled to replace losses. Older equipment pulled from storage was often outdated and unreliable. Each month of fighting widened the gap between what was lost and what could be replaced. Artillery became Russia's substitute for maneuver. Massive barrages flattened terrain and destroyed infrastructure. But artillery cannot maneuver. It cannot seize ground without support. It consumes enormous quantities of ammunition, and it requires logistics that must move constantly. As counter-battery fire improved and drones guided strikes with increasing accuracy, artillery positions became vulnerable as well. The solution created new problems faster than it solved old ones. The psychological dimension of the end of maneuver warfare was just as damaging. Soldiers trained to advance, exploit breakthroughs, and achieve decisive victories found themselves stuck in static positions under constant threat from above. The stress of being watched continuously, never knowing when a drone might strike, eroded morale. The sense of initiative disappeared. Survival replaced victory as the primary objective. This mental shift is devastating for any army. The myth of Russian military dominance unraveled in real time. Burned-out vehicles became symbols of failure. Videos of destroyed armor spread globally within hours. The image of unstoppable armored might was replaced by scenes of stalled convoys and abandoned equipment. Deterrence relies on perception as much as reality. When perception collapses, so does influence. Diplomatically, the consequences were immediate. Allies grew cautious. Neutral states hedged their bets. Arms buyers questioned the effectiveness of Russian equipment. Military reputation, once damaged, is difficult to restore. Every failure on the battlefield echoed far beyond it, reshaping global calculations. Russia's biggest mistake was assuming that maneuver warfare would remain decisive simply because it always had been. History does not reward assumptions. It rewards adaptation. The great military powers of the past fell not because they lacked courage or numbers, but because they failed to understand change. Cavalry dominated until machine guns appeared. Battleships ruled until aircraft carriers emerged. Tanks dominated until drones and precision weapons rewrote the rules. The end of maneuver warfare does not mean movement is irrelevant. It means movement must be invisible, protected, and integrated into a broader network of intelligence, air defense, and electronic warfare. Russia attempted to bolt modern tools onto an old framework instead of rebuilding the framework itself. This created a force that looked modern on paper, but behaved traditionally on the battlefield. Every failed advance reinforced the new reality. The battlefield punished predictability, roads became death traps, fixed routes were pre-targeted. Attempts to mass forces drew immediate fire. Dispersal improved survival, but reduced offensive power. Concentration improved firepower, but invited destruction. Maneuver warfare relies on resolving this tension through speed and surprise. Modern surveillance eliminated both. The economic cost of this failure continues to grow. Tanks, armored vehicles, artillery, and missiles are expensive. Training crews takes time. Replacing losses drains budgets and industries. War becomes not just a military struggle, but an economic one. In prolonged attrition, the side with greater economic resilience holds the advantage. Russia's economic isolation compounded its battlefield problems, turning every loss into a long-term setback. The social cost is harder to measure, but equally real. Prolonged war strains societies, casualties accumulate, families suffer, confidence erodes. When victory remains distant and sacrifices continue, questions emerge. Modern information flows make it impossible to fully control narratives. Reality leaks through. The end of maneuver warfare removed the promise of quick, decisive victory, replacing it with an open-ended struggle few societies are eager to sustain. From a strategic perspective, Russia's mistake reshaped global military thinking. Armies around the world are studying this conflict closely. Investments are shifting. Drones, air defense, electronic warfare, and networked command systems are gaining priority. Heavy armor is being reevaluated. Doctrine is evolving. The lesson is clear. Future wars will be decided by those who see first, decide fastest, and strike precisely. Russia's experience is a warning, not an anomaly. Any military that clings too tightly to past successes risks repeating the same error. The battlefield is not static. It is a living system shaped by technology, economics, and human behavior. Maneuver warfare dominated an era defined by limited surveillance and slower decision cycles. That era is over. The tragedy is that this outcome was not inevitable. Signals were visible long before the war began. Conflicts elsewhere demonstrated the growing power of drones and precision weapons. Exercises revealed vulnerabilities. Analysts warned of over-reliance on armor, but institutions resist change. Success in the past creates confidence that blinds leaders to new threats. Russia paid the price for that blindness. As the war continues, Russia adapts incrementally. Counter-drone measures improve. Tactics evolve. But adaptation under fire is costly and slow. The strategic damage has already been done. The end of maneuver warfare arrived during this conflict, and Russia was caught on the wrong side of history. In the end, Russia's biggest mistake was not losing tanks or territory. It was losing relevance to the future of war. Power today is not measured by how much steel you can move, but by how effectively you can integrate information, technology, and human decision-making. Maneuver warfare promised decisive victory through movement. Modern warfare delivers survival through adaptation. History will remember this war as a turning point, not because it introduced new weapons, but because it confirmed a transformation already underway. The age of armored breakthroughs is fading. The age of persistent surveillance, precision strike, and networked warfare has arrived. Those who fail to accept this reality will continue to bleed slowly and relentlessly. Russia's experience stands as the clearest example of what happens when doctrine lags behind reality. The end of maneuver warfare was not announced with a declaration. It was written in the wreckage of burned tanks, stalled advances, and lost illusions. And Russia's biggest mistake was believing that the battlefield would still obey the rules of the past.